Joshua, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
It is a pleasure. Thank you for having me. What took you so long? To have me
Yeah, I
on?
know. Tell me about that. Well, we didn't know each other. We got introduced by a mutual friend. So
That's
helped,
fantastic.
right?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your work. Appreciate
That's
everything
great.
you do. Honestly, it's a pleasure to get to meet you online and get to talk a little bit.
Thank you. It's a privilege to meet you too, and learning a lot from you as well. So you become a leader in the minimalist space, if I can call it that. What attracted you to it in the first place? There's got to be a backstory.
There is. I suppose the question, was I attracted to the minimalist space is different than was I attracted to minimalism. And I wasn't necessarily attracted to the space. I don't even think there was much of a space 13 years ago. But certainly attracted to the lifestyle of minimalism. My neighbor introduced me to it. I was living in Vermont, and I was cleaning out my garage one Saturday morning, and it took hours and hours. My 5-year-old son was playing alone in the backyard, and I just complaining to my neighbor, like, I can't believe how much time is going into this garage and taking care of all my stuff. And she said, my daughter's a minimalist. Maybe you should try it out. And I was hooked. Like, as soon as I heard the word, just looking at the pile of things in my garage I spent all day taking care of. And then there's my son swinging alone on the swing set in the backyard. And I think suddenly realized not only were the things I owned not making me happy, which no one says their things aren't making them happy, right? We all say our things aren't making them happy, but just that second step of, hey, wait a minute, all the things I own are actually taking me away from the very thing that does bring me happiness, meaning, joy, significance, fulfillment. So that's what introduced me to minimalism, and then I started writing about it, and has grown ever since then.
I think we've all been at that place where we get overwhelmed by stuff. So it's interesting because a lot of people would say, well, I'll just clean the garage and move on. There must have been like a deeper attraction to it. And we're going to get into the whole meaning piece and relationship and everything, but why didn't you just become, I'm going to ignore that person, or that's really cool for you? Like, was there something, like, what drew you
in? That is a great way to phrase the question. They say that the greatest seed of change in our lives is discontent. And I would say, as I look back on that moment, I mean, sometimes I think we're just prepared for the right words at the right time, and a message I could have heard on any other Saturday, and it just wouldn't have had the impact as it did that specific day for whatever reason. But as I can look back, I can see always a little discontent with my finances that, hey, I'm making more money than I made 10 years ago, but I don't feel any farther ahead. It seems like I should be farther ahead. Why am I not? Or I was giving away about 10%, but it felt like I was just spending more on myself than I should be needing. Like, I wanted to be more generous than I was. And so I just think there's a little bit of financial discontent. Like, what am I missing here that I can't seem to get ahead? And then I like to say I was growing discontented over the focus of my life's energy, which I think kind of came to a head on that day of, hey, you're right. I'm just wasting so much time taking care of stuff that doesn't matter at the expense of things that really do matter. Certainly, as my kids were getting older, 5 and 2, and I was a pastor at the time, and so there was definitely a gap between what I thought God was calling me to do with my life and what I was actually living out day by day. And minimalism seemed to provide that answer to connect those two worlds a little bit more.
Yeah, it is interesting. I always, my kids are older now. They're 26 and 30, but I remember that stage where you don't even need to buy stuff. Stuff just accumulates, right? Like, it's like, where did all this come from? And it's gifts from friends and family and birthdays and Christmas and freebies and all that stuff. And we are drowning in stuff. I don't know whether this is still true or not, but for years, the self-storage industry was one of the fastest growing industries in America. And you see them all over the place. It's like, okay, we're paying, I don't know how much it costs. I don't have one, but $100 a month to store stuff that we have so much stuff we can't even look at it. So we pay you money to put it over there. What is, like, our great grandparents would look back on this and went, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, talk about this phenomena culturally.
Yeah, when you
Joshua.
think about it, not just our grandparents, but any human being at any point in history, I think, would look at how we're living our lives now, and it would be incredibly foreign to them. Like, human beings have never owned as much stuff as we do today. I just looked up those self-storage stats yesterday, as a matter of fact. The average American home has tripled in size in the last 50 years, and still 10.6% of Americans rent off-site storage. So not only are our homes 3 times as big as they used to be, 10.6% of us, and over 40% of people say that they can't park in their garage without some sort of inconvenience trying to shuffle around the boxes or whatever it might be. So it is pretty.
What percent is that?
Yeah, a little over 40. I
What is
think 25% of people can't park in their garage, and over 40% say there's so much stuff in the garage that it's a pain to have to park inside of it. But
Well, that was my gift of the summer of 2021 to myself. I've got 2 cars in the garage. Just today at lunch, I was saying, but you know what? It was a lot of decluttering. It was a whole lot of like, okay, this is from 5 years ago, and I'm a little bit of a neat freak, but the stuff just accumulates. And even this at lunch today, I was saying to my wife, okay, why don't we get the contractors back in? We'll take out this wall, make it a little bit easier, get rid of some more stuff, create some more storage space. But sometimes when you think of minimalism, like for those the few people who are watching via video, we do have a YouTube presence. Most is audio, but like it's not like you're sitting, with a cardboard box propping up your laptop, on a bench in this white warehouse type environment. Looks like you're on a sofa. You've got a laptop. You've got some shelves with some really nice pictures and things on them. Where's the line, or is there a line, or how does that work out? Like, how much stuff? I feel like it's a Berenstain Bears book. How much stuff is too much
That'd
stuff?
be a great Berenstain Bears book. And by the way, people should be watching you on video. You're a good-looking guy. Why waste their time just on audio? That's good to know. You're on YouTube. It's interesting because I started writing about minimalism 13 years ago, and I think back then minimalism was pretty extreme. People trying to live with less than 100 things, or trying to live out of backpacks, moving into 200 square foot homes, or living off the grid or whatever. Like, these were the people writing about minimalism. And I don't know if I ruined the word or if I helped with the word a little bit, but when I heard minimalism, I was in to own less stuff because I could see how my stuff had become a distraction. But my goal was never to prove how few things I could own. Like, it wasn't, I'm just going to get down to a cardboard box and no mattress. It was much more, I think, values focused in terms of, okay, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to accomplish with my life? Where am I going to find meaning in life? And then what are all the things that I need to keep in order to do that? Like, a minimalist farmer is going to own something different than a minimalist writer, or a minimalist mechanic, or a minimalist pastor, or a minimalist CEO, or a minimalist teacher. Like, there are different things that we need to own in order to fulfill our role in the world. It's just all the other things that we're not just accumulating, but chasing after, that become the distraction from that role. So my definition of minimalism is and became and is, I call it, the intentional promotion of the things I most value by removing anything that distracts me from it. And certainly, being a family of 4, working at a church at the time, like having small groups that meet in my home, and doing premarital counseling, and wanting to have dinners with the future bride and groom. Like, there were some things I needed to own in order to do those things well. But most of the stuff that I had accumulated wasn't needed for that. And it was actually keeping me from fulfilling that role rather than contributing to it.
How does it keep you? I want to drill down on that. How does it keep you from fulfilling that role?
As I write in the book, there's a lot of ways, but things that matter. I write about how the distraction of possessions keeps us from our purpose, and really 3 ways that I narrowed down: money, time, and focus. Money being everything that we buy costs us money. It costs us money to buy it, but it also costs us money to care for and keep and store, and bigger houses and storage units and whatever it might be. So just all the money that we waste buying things that we don't need is all money we would like to have back. As I say, look around your house, all that clutter used to be money. And it distracts our time. All the things we own take up not just physical space in our home, but they take up mental space in our mind. They have to be cleaned and organized and managed and repaired and replaced, or how much time we spend working just to earn the money so we can do the shopping to go buy the thing that we bring home to clean and organize and manage and maintain for the rest of our lives. So Randy Alcorn says every increased possession adds increased anxiety onto our lives. And I think that it is so very true. And most people, at least this is what I learned, most people don't realize how much of a burden their possessions have become until they begin to remove them. And until you begin to get rid of those things that you don't need, and you start to see how much your life is freed up. So money and time, but honestly, probably the biggest one for most people nowadays is focus, and just how possessions become the object of our affection or attention, how much time we think about owning the thing that we wish we had, or we're trying to figure out how to get the thing or save the money to buy the thing. And although we would never sit across the table from somebody and say that our greatest goal in life is to just own as much stuff as we possibly can, we still just find ourselves thinking about, I wish I had the bigger house, and I wish I had the nicer car and the trendier fashion. And oh, I really wish we could buy new furniture. And when that becomes our focus, I think we become distracted from those things that matter most, obviously.
So I want to get to the philosophical part, because and thank you for the privilege of blurbing your book too. But I want to get to the practical, because I think we do have an accumulation bias. I had a guest on the podcast, 300, 400 episodes ago, Andrew Mellon. He's in New York City, and he's a personal organizer. I should have him back at some point. What got me is I saw him say online one day, he just said, clutter is deferred decision-making. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a leadership thing. It's like, I don't know what to do with, this glasses case, so I haven't got a place for it. So I'm going to put it there on my desk. And then, that's what we do with everything. We don't have a place for our keys. We don't have a place for this. And we end up with like 5 different places in the house for food, where we have a pantry, but then we have a kitchen, but then we have some stored in the basement and some stored in a closet, and on and on and on it goes. And he just says, and I find that true, I find clutter to be stressful, but I also know that I naturally get very cluttered. So for people who, and we do have a TV show also called Hoarders, so we know that this gets to be a big issue with some people. So for the leader who isn't immediately attracted the way you were that day when you were cleaning out your garage, what would you say to him or her as they're like, and I'll give you one more example. I'm sort of framing a question, or trying to frame a question. Sunk cost bias. So I had 4 bikes while I was doing the garage organization project. I had 4 bikes, and I'm like, gosh, they're not going to fit. Like, I can't do the bike and the stuff I need for the boat and for the winter. We're big winter sports people, and carry 4 bikes. There's only 2 of us who live here, and my wife and I have a road bike. We have a mountain bike. I had not ridden my mountain bike, I don't know, in 3, 4, 5 years, maybe. But there was this idea. It cost me almost $1,000 over a decade ago. It was brand new. There was nothing wrong with it. And then one day, I just pulled the guy who was helping me with some landscaping, pulled him aside. I said, you and your son love to ride bikes, right? He's like, yeah. I said, here you go. Take this bike, take that bike. I'll tune them up for you. I don't know. There was such a release in that moment. It felt good to give something away. And it's like, have I missed my bike? No. And if I want it, I can go buy another one, right? Like, what is it that keeps us hanging on to that sunk cost bias clutter that we often keep around even if we're not using it?
Yeah. Man, so many reasons. And I don't know if I know the specific reason for any specific person, because I think it's probably different for everybody. Like some people who grew up riding bikes with their parents or grew up riding bikes with their kids, and now they're in a different season of life, but that, the bike reminds them of that time that they almost wish they had back, but they're in a new season of life, but holding on to it allows them to hold on to that season a little bit. One thing you said about, people who hear this and are maybe not so drawn to the idea. Honestly, I think most people who hear about minimalism are drawn to it in some way. Like even you could say, I'm not even a cluttered person, but even thinking about this, you're right. There's some things that I could sort out, and some things that I could
100%.
get rid of. And I think most people tend to be that way. So gosh, sunk cost, where to get started, so many different things. I think that concerning the sunk cost one, because I talk to people about this a lot and help them through this. And I always use that phrase sunk cost because I learned about it in accounting, where you don't make a business decision based on expenses from last year. So if you bought the printing press 10 years ago for $20,000 and there's a new printing press for $5,000 that prints things twice as fast, you can't decide to buy the new one based on how much money you spent on the old one. Like that shouldn't factor into your decision if this is a good investment or not. And a lot of people do get caught up in the, hey, I spent so much money on this stuff. This was such an expensive bike, or we bought the really nice house, or I bought all these clothes, or this was for a past season of life. And the reality is you can't go back and change the past. I mean, you can't go back and get the money back, but you can't base your decision on how do I make the most from my current season of life based on what you bought or utilized in a past season of life. So who are you today? What are you trying to accomplish? And just because you use that bike in the past doesn't mean it's serving a role, serving a purpose, adding value to your life today. And if it's not, then there's probably someone who can find value in it. And you're going to find, I just think, more personal joy, more personal fulfillment in knowing that bike is being used by someone rather than holding on to it for yourself. So that was a long answer. I don't know if I got to any of that question.
That's a great answer. I want to stay in the practical for a minute. So another thing Andrew and I talked about in that episode was just over there under the stairs outside of my office, we've got a couple of Rubbermaid totes, and they're full of like medals that our kids got. They were pretty active in music and sports, and, probably art projects that they did in first grade, second grade, that kind of thing. And, what do you do about memorabilia and things like that? Now, ours are just probably a couple of totes at the most, but what is your thought about stuff that people hang on to for just that sentimental reasons?
I think you nailed it perfectly. You're living exactly what I would advise someone to do. A museum isn't enjoyable because every piece of artwork ever created hangs on the walls. Like a museum is enjoyable because someone has curated the collection to, this is the most meaningful art. This was an important part in an artist's life or in the history of art. And so these are the ones that we're going to show people how people changed and how art changed. And when I look back at, things that I've saved from my kids' childhood, it's okay. What are the most meaningful pieces? What did they work hard on? What showed like a significant growth in, their writing or their schoolwork? This was a class that she loved. And so, like if people say, hey, I've got, all this memorabilia from my kids' childhood, I'll just say, try to cut it down to one box or try to cut it in half. And in doing that, usually you're able to separate the most important from the just kind of important. Like if I were to say, even with your totes, like what are the three most important, you can keep only three things from that tote. Like you'd probably be surprised how quickly you could discover, like, these are the three things that mean the most to me from my kids' childhood. And not that you just have to keep three things, but like, my grandfather passed away in December, probably the man I looked up to as much as anyone, including my dad. And he passed away in December, 99 and a half. And the question became, what am I going to keep of his? And I just remember going through his house and thinking, what is the one thing that most represents my grandpa? Like, what's the one thing that represents the values I want to be true of me? It represents the life that he lived. He was a shepherd boy growing up, and then he was a pastor when he got older. And so there was a figurine of a little shepherd carrying a sheep. And I'm like, that's it. Like, that is who my grandpa was to me. And it exemplifies so much of what I wanted. And so they didn't end up in a tote in the basement, but it's a figurine, and I put it right in my living room and see it every single day. And I think in that way, it almost bring more value to it by keeping a smaller amount of things. So anyway.
Oh, that's super helpful. Yeah. I think Andrew said something, again, I'm going back 3 or 4 years in my memory bank here, but I think he said, those possessions are not your grandfather. Mm-hmm. Those possessions, those memorabilia is not your children, and it's not the relationship. I found that tremendously freeing. And just note to file, I think I'm going to do some more decluttering this weekend. You've really got my juices going. So this is good.
How do you determine? Before we switch gears, like very practically, the advice that I give to people is to start with the easiest stuff first. A lot of people hear about minimizing or decluttering. They're like, you're right, I got to go through the attic. I got to go through the garage. But I got to go through the totes of all the kids' stuff. And those are like really difficult places to start. I think if you just take everything out of your car that doesn't need to be there, you could probably do it in like 15 minutes, but the next time you get in your car, you can feel the difference and sense that it feels better. And then, declutter your living room or your bedroom, your bathroom, like these easier spaces that I think we can recognize right away and kind of build up to some of those more difficult spots.
So here you are. How many years is this in the journey for you now, Joshua? 13 years. What have been, I imagine there's probably a settling point. You probably, went through a couple of years where you were really getting into it. You experimented a little bit. I don't know whether you've settled, but you definitely have a default now. I haven't seen, a ton of your work like other people would, but what I've seen, you always seem to be in a black t-shirt. Is that intentional? Do you keep things like right down to the wardrobe? Walk us through some very practical things about where you've landed in a minimalist lifestyle.
Yeah, I think clothes, I think, is probably as good of an example as anything else. I probably started with 100 to 120 articles in my closet. And I went through it and just got rid of what I didn't think I needed and cut down to 60. And then I stumbled across this thing called Project 333. Courtney Carver started this idea. And you experiment by wearing just 33 articles of clothing for 3 months. So you're not burning everything in the backyard, but just for 3 months, I'm just going to wear 33 things. And it forced me to become very intentional about, okay, what matches what do I love to wear? I'm going to be wearing these things over and over again for 3 months. And I cut it down to that space. And Carey, I just loved it. Honestly, really? I thought I liked my closet with all these things in it. I cut it in half and I'm like, I really kind of like this at 60 things. And then I cut it in half again. And I'm like, this is so much better than it was before. Everything matches everything. Everything is my favorite. I don't waste any money on clothes that I don't need to waste on clothes. I could wear anything in my closet on any given day. Literally, there's no morning where I open up the closet. I'm like, what am I going to wear today? I try on a shirt and I don't like it. And I take it off and I try something else. And I'm asking my wife, do I wear this shirt with these pants? And do these shoes match with this? It's just, this is what I wear. And a writer, I forget her name, she once said, the easiest way to become iconic is to wear the same thing every day. And I just loved that mentality of, hey, I'm kind of known for wearing typically a black V-neck t-shirt. I have a couple long sleeve black shirts, and it's a little bit chilly here in Phoenix today, so wearing a long sleeve black shirt. I also have a couple white ones, but they all match the same pants. And it's just an example of we do laundry about once a week, so I have enough stuff to get through the week, and seems to work out quite right. Dishware, coffee mugs. I just think cookware, like all these things where we just get caught into thinking more is going to be better. And man, just a study was done recently how the human's brain's default is to solve a problem. I'm going to add more things to solve the problem. And we don't think of how removing things actually solves the same problem. You're going to change the subject, or ask a different question, but they did this survey with Legos, and they had 2 Lego things together. And the challenge was to make this one match this one, or to make the 2 match together. And in like 80 to 90% of the cases, the people solved it by adding Lego pieces to the one that needed more to match the other, as opposed to those who would just remove a few pieces to make it match. And started kind of diving into this idea of, do we solve problems by adding things, or do we solve problems by removing things? And the implications are not just the clothes we wear, but how we run our businesses, how we disciple people, how we lead people, the work that we do, the businesses that we run, all these aspects. Let's just have another meeting, as opposed to, well, what if we had a shorter meeting? Would that solve the problem as well? We don't even tend to think of it that way.
No, we don't think about removal a lot. We always try to solve by addition. I'm wondering if you can take us through your kitchen. That is another source of clutter, worry, add. A lot of us have become even better at ordering online in the last 2 years than we were before. So it's just easier to get that new salt and pepper shaker, that new frying pan, whatever you're looking at. What are some choices you've got 2 kids, Joshua?
2 kids.
2 kids. Okay, so family of 4. What is a kitchen? And I assume you still have people over. You're not in direct, pastoral ministry, but you're probably hosting, you're social, all that stuff. So what does a minimalist kitchen look like?
My mother-in-law is with us for 2 weeks right now. So yes, we still have people over. Still host small groups as well. How do I do that over? I was really worried about the kitchen. And then I ran across an article by Mark Bittman, the minimalist chef, in the New York Times. The Mark Bittman, you can still Google it. A no-frills kitchen still cooks. That's the name of the article. I send everybody to it. A no-frills kitchen still cooks.
Well, we'll link to it in the show notes.
Here he is, this professional chef, and he lists the only 33 items, the only 33 tools that you need in your kitchen to prepare any dish that you want. And so it's like, a couple stainless steel bowls, a couple different knives, a couple different frying pans. And he says, if you have these 33 things, you can cook any meal that can be made anywhere else. You don't need all the frilly unitasker things. If you know how to use a knife, you can prepare all these meals. And so that was what I used to declutter our kitchen and minimize the kitchen. I went in and I just found the 33 things that he recognized, and I put them all on the table. And then everything else, I said, well, this professional chef says I don't need any of these things. There's the egg yolk separator, and coffee scoop, 4, 5, 6 different spatulas, like all these different duplicate items. And I said, well, there's a few things that I kind of like using. And so I kept a few of the things besides the 33, but everything else, I just felt free. Like I felt like I didn't need to keep these things. And maybe I'd have to become better at using a knife, but I eventually did. And then here's the best thing. I learned to love cooking far more than I did before. Like when the kitchen was cluttered and you have to move everything around to get the one bowl out of the cabinet, shuffling everything in the kitchen junk drawer to find the one knife that I always wanted in the first place. Everything had a place and the counters were clear, and I just loved the act of cooking far more than I did when I had more stuff. So,
well, it's interesting. I think about the word the word cupboard used to be a cup board. It was a board for a cup. And now you've got these monster kitchens and pantries and everything. And even I was thinking while you were talking about my wife's grandmother's house was built maybe in the 1920s or 30s. And the closet was literally about the width of my iMac. You know what I mean? Like you had 2 or 3 items to hang in there, probably your Sunday clothes, your workday clothes, and another set. And things have just changed so radically. So go back 13 years ago. There you are, Joshua, young parent, pastor, leading a church in Vermont. Here you are today. Talk about the difference in your state of mind and how you see life, not just how you see your environment, but obviously the point is that it makes a whole other philosophy of living, which is really what your new book is about.
It became a journey of removing possessions, which freed up money, time, energy. I feel like I became a better example for my kids. Like it just freed up. Focus is maybe the best way to say it. No. The best way to say it is I found intentionality in my life in ways I hadn't before. Like when I started taking van loads of things to Goodwill or Salvation Army, I was like, why did I have so much stuff that I didn't need? And it occurred to me that I was just living a pretty unintentional life, that advertisers were influencing me, society was influencing me, culture, people I was trying to impress. Like I was being motivated by things that weren't truest to me or even aligned with what was most important to me. So began owning less and freeing up my life to pursue things that matter and devote more of my life to it. And then started wrestling with, hey, like possessions isn't the only way that I've become unintentional with my life. Like a bunch of my habits are pretty unintentional. Like this isn't the best way to spend my time. Even maybe the way I certainly the way I worked, what work should I be doing and what work should I be motivated and what should be my motivation to do work well? If it's not to make a bunch of money, to buy a bunch of stuff, like where, what becomes my motivation there? And so, written a couple books about minimalism, and the new book, Things That Matter, is all about not just removing possessions, but what are some of the other cultural distractions that keep us from things that matter? So not just possessions, but money and accolades, fear, past mistakes, selfish pursuit of happiness, like a lot of different things that I think when they become the priority, we end up regretting them at the end of our lives.
Which is a nice segue into, and I want to repeat your definition of, how you define minimalist, the intentional promotion of the things we most value by removing anything that distracts us from them. I think that's really solid. That has a spiritual undertone to it as well. So let's go there. How is this more than just about cleaning out your closet, getting a garage you can park in, cutting down your wardrobe, simplifying your kitchen? How does this apply to the broader orb of life?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's about taking back control of life. It's about deciding what is going to be most important for me, to me, rather than letting someone else dictate it. And maybe more than anything else, I was starting down this journey, and I remember publishing a blog post one time about how difficult it was to decide what to keep and what to get rid of and what I needed and what I didn't. And a friend of mine, Dustin, he left a comment on the article, and he says, "It seems to me minimalism would force questions of values upon you." And I said, that is exactly what's happening. Like, maybe for the first time, I'm really wrestling with, like, what do I want to accomplish? Why am I here on earth? Like, how am I gifted and created? Like, what is the best good that I can bring into the world? And then what do I need in order to accomplish that? And then what is all these other things that have just become clutter along the way, far more than just physical clutter, but pursuits that are cluttering up my potential and robbing me of it.
Well, you were a pastor at the time when you started this. How would you have defined the purpose of your life then, and how has it come into a sharper or perhaps different focus now? Because you're still very active in your faith, but this is what you do full time. So how has that actually reshaped your understanding of the purpose and meaning of life?
There's a little bit in terms of what is the best role that I can play in the kingdom, what is the best that I can do for society, like what's the most good that I can do for the most number of people. There's been a little change in that, although it wasn't intentional and nothing that I pursued, just that I was a pastor for 15 years and now I've been a writer for 8 or 9 years. And there just came a point where what can I do best? And as I always say, there were a lot of pastors who were better than me, but there didn't seem to be so many people writing about minimalism or connecting with minimalism in the way that I do. So a bit of a change in my role there. But overall, minimalism didn't necessarily change my values, like faith, family, relationships, making a difference in the world. Like, I think I always would have said those were my most important things. Those are my most important values. But minimalism freed me up. Removing distractions, I think, freed me up to accomplish more in all of those areas than I ever thought I would have accomplished. I think minimalism has made me a better follower of Christ. I think that owning less stuff has made me a better father to my kids. I don't know, probably made me a better husband. I hope it's made me a better husband, certainly freed me up to invest more time and energy into those things. And then, I think the difference I'm making in the world is far different than I thought it would be, or at least I've accomplished more in that area than I ever thought it would be.
So some of that is the removal of like mental clutter and just the overwhelm and that kind of thing. Can you say more about that? Like, I'm very interested in this because if you talk, I just wrote a book about it a few months ago, but most people are overwhelmed, overcommitted, and overworked. Is it moving in on that territory?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I haven't read the book. Is it? Would you make the case that they're overcommitted, overscheduled to the wrong things? Like, that's the form of, it's very, I think when you're walking in purpose, when you're walking in intentionality, it doesn't feel like I'm over busy or overcommitted or overscheduled. Although there are seasons of life where certainly things are busier or you're more focused on things than other, but it feels very natural. Like, certainly my faith plays a role in this, where I feel like I'm just living out what I'm supposed to be living out. Not that it's always easy or never busy, but I'm walking the way I'm supposed to be walking. But as I can look back, and even today, it's not like the trappings don't still get in the way. But when I find myself, okay, how do I make more money doing this? Or how do I reach more people, build my following quicker doing this? It's when we get scattered, I think, chasing all those other things is where we start to feel overworked and overcommitted. I guess I was asking about the book, which...
Yeah, I think that's right. The metaphor, although I didn't use it in the book, is, when it comes to overwhelmed, overcommitted, overworked, most people are stressed out. They've got a level of stress that sometimes tips them into burnout, probably low-grade burnout. the closet metaphor comes to mind, right? Where you got 138 things in your closet. And it's that feeling, even for men, I find this like, I don't know what to wear today. There's too many choices here. And then you realize the thing you want to wear is in the laundry, which hasn't been done for a week and a half. And then you realize, oh, you can't start laundry because the laundry from yesterday didn't get moved from the washer to the dryer. So now you got to redo that. And then you're like, oh, I got to go to the dry cleaner. But like, you don't have time to go to the dry cleaner. So it's like that. It's a domino of just cascading things that leaves leaders in leadership in life feeling just completely overwhelmed. And I imagine there's a lot of literature coming out on focus and on simplifying things, how our focus is gone. And it reminds me a little bit, and I want to go there. You've got this quote from an Auschwitz survivor in the book. Mm-hmm. I've come to realize that materialism, and I'm reading, holds people captive in many of the same ways communism does. The communism I grew up with sought to destroy our personal identities by force. Materialism does the same, but materialism destroys personal identity by choice.
Yeah.
We chose it. Interesting. A little Orwellian, a little bit like Huxley there for a minute, that Orwell-Huxley debate that Neil Postman talks about. Can you comment on that? Yeah. Like we've chosen a life that is derailing us? Yeah. It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, it came out. I was speaking in Poland at a fathers conference, and the opening banquet, I sat next to a guy who was going to serve as my translator, and we just started talking. He was about my age, and he said that he was just recounting growing up in Poland as a teenager, looking outside his window at bread lines, like right outside his apartment. And it was and here's a guy my age, and it was just a reminder of like, I don't know, Poland's history, like grew up in communism and now they're this free market economy. And so I was talking to the organizer during the conference, and he's like, let me tell you why I invited you here. And he relayed this story about the Auschwitz survivor who, grew up under communism, but had visited Western Europe. And he said, like we're forced into a certain way of life by force, which certainly isn't enjoyable, but I'm in Western Europe and they're all living almost exactly the same. They're just choosing it by, materialism and advertisements and marketers. And they kind of, the way I say it is, the world seems to hijack our passions and direct it towards whatever they want to direct it towards. And suddenly we're all shopping at the same stores and buying the same trends. And even more than that, we're all chasing the same things. We're chasing bigger possessions. We're chasing more money. We're chasing retirement as quickly as we can get to it. We're chasing the $4 million in our retirement account by the time we retire, because that's what Forbes just said we're supposed to have. And we're all kind of losing our identity along the way, or certainly learning. I mean, just from my faith background, I think we're missing out on God's call in our life because we're allowing the world to shape what our passions and pursuits are.
I read a piece recently that said the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, is starting to lose steam a little bit. Because people who are retiring at 33, 35 are like, oh boy, you got a whole chapter on that too. You call it Beaches Get Boring. I've always said to my friends, this is my retirement project. And they're like, what do you, are you ever going to quit? I'm like, you can only lie on a beach for so long. And I get the opportunity to lie on a beach for a week or two a year. Like that's plenty. Talk about that a little bit, because I think what you've written in Things That Matter is a book that really points us to how minimalism can really get us to what life is supposed to be about and what it is supposed to be about. So what is the challenge with this idea that beaches aren't all they're cracked up?
Yeah. I learned it, probably two different things kind of come together at once. The idea of owning less. So what's money for? So what's work for, if not to make the money to buy the things? And then, I was probably shaped as much as anything else by my grandfather, who worked until he was 99 and a half. He worked, he always said he wanted to work 3 days before his funeral. It's when he wanted to retire 3 days before my funeral, and he made it about 10 days before his funeral, working 40, 50 hours a week. And he would always say, Joshua, retirement was invented by the politicians, which should tell you everything you need to know about it. And which really sent me studying, and it's true. Like it was like literally invented in Germany in the late 1800s, where
did not know
and
that.
It was about moving older people out of work so that younger people had jobs that they could move into, and then it actually became like a vote getting venture. Like if you're over 65, you won't have to work anymore. We'll pay for you to not work so that younger people can move in and I can get all your votes with your 65. And so literally it's about like 120-year-old experiment. And now it is CNN called early retirement, the new American dream. I'm just convinced that work, it's tough to enjoy work when the whole goal of work is to stop doing it as quickly as you can. If the goal of work is to make enough money so I don't have to work, then there's just no lasting joy in this. It just becomes a thing I do, and I worry about having enough money so that I can quit when I'm 65, and just the obsession with it. We did a survey for the book, and close to 55, 60% of people said that if their dream in life, they would much rather retire early than work later on in life. And I just think that we see work incorrectly when we see it that way, that work is love. Like I do what I'm good at so I can bring the best into the world so that someone else can do what they're good at, and all of us benefit, right? Like you go hunt and I'll go build houses, and you go farm and we'll trade goods at the end, and we'll have better farming and better houses and better dentistry and better accounting and better lawyers, and everyone just does what they're good at, and all of society benefits in the long run. And I just think that there's meaning in that, and there's fulfillment in that, and there's joy in that, rather than trying to see how quickly I can get out of it. So finding,
it's interesting.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish the thought. I was just going to say, there's a meism underneath that. Right? There's a meism to the accumulation. There's a meism in, I need so much stuff that I've got to go park it at a self-storage place. There's a meism in that the ultimate goal of me making money is so that I can buy things, as they say, that I don't really need to impress people I don't even like. And there's me getting across the finish line so I can go lie on a beach. Yeah, there's something broken with that vision.
Yeah. Dorothy Sayers wrote about that around World War II. She, back in Great Britain, like she was writing about how work has become selfish. Like I go to work to make the money so I can buy the house or buy the car or buy the vacation or retire early. And when this is our understanding of the goal of work is just to make the paycheck, then the greatest form of happiness that we can find in work is all selfish. Like, how does it serve me? The greatest joy that we find in life is when we're serving others and when we're helping others. And all the studies show this over and over again, that the greatest fulfillment comes when we're helping others and serving others. And when we start to see our work, regardless of what it is, whether we're a pastor or a CEO or a landscaper or the grocery store clerk or the teacher or the dentist or the architect, like I'm serving you by doing this job, and I get compensated for it, which allows me to go, buy the food that this farmer graciously did by serving me, and the grocery store set up by serving me. And it's just a very different way to approach it, work. And in that way, I think it, I hope that it starts to remove a little bit of competition, of, hey, I have this skill that allows me to make more money. Man, if we've seen anything in our world, like the most essential people among us are not necessarily the ones making the most money, but we all should be walking in that with what we like to do and are good at doing. And in this way, we love one another and we benefit society. It's just a selfless way to view work.
You note in the book that America has grown a lot wealthier in the last 50 years, but we have not grown more generous, I should say. Why is that, Joshua?
I think I was going to say probably two ways to answer the question. I think from my faith-based spiritual background, I think that this factors into it. I think when you even someone who's a Christian doesn't necessarily give more money when they start making more money, and I think there's a piece where the world tastes good. I think that there's nice restaurants to eat at, and there's really fun cars to drive, and there's really lavish vacations that we can take. And I don't know if you've seen this in your own life. I've certainly seen it in my life. But once you get a taste of those things, they become hard to separate from. Almost like the world gets a hold of us in that way, and it's tough to not keep going on those really nice vacations. And so spiritually, I think the world just gets a better grip on our heart. I think there's another aspect, even if you're not spiritual or faith-based, where there's just a reality that money never provides what we want it to provide. And by that, I mean 80% of Americans report financial-related stress. And I often wonder why is that the case? Like, we're one of the wealthiest nations in the history of the world. Why are 80% of us stressed about money? Like, just look around. We have food, we have shelter, we have clothing. I mean, I've been all over the world, and I can tell you that Americans aren't strapped for money and things, and yet for some reason we're still stressed about money. And I think it's because we keep looking for money to provide what it's never going to provide. We look to money to provide happiness, and we look to money to provide security. And we think if I make that much money, or once I save that much money, I will feel secure, or I will be happier with my life. And we reach that level of money and we don't feel more secure. We don't feel happier. The Atlantic once did a survey of people over $2 million net worth, and they all said they'd be happier if they had 25% more. Like, it doesn't matter where you are on the scale, we reach that next level, we don't feel happier, we don't feel more secure. And rather than saying, I should stop looking for happiness and security in money, we just say, oh, I just don't have enough. I had the wrong goalpost. If I was making this much, or if I had that much saved, I'd feel happy and I'd feel secure. And so we're all stressed that we don't have enough when the reality is that we do. And so back to your original question, I think it just becomes like, culturally speaking, we just think we're going to be happier if we have more money. And 80% of Americans, the survey we did for this book, 80% of Americans say that they would be happier if they had more money. And the two thoughts of, I'll be happier with more money and I'm going to be a more generous person, just can't coexist in our minds. It's one or the other. Either I'm going to be happier with more money, or I'm going to be happier and more fulfilled by becoming a generous person. And I contend.
I see generosity also as the antidote to my greed, because I think we're all a little bit greedy. Do you have a line, or do you have advice about when a vacation, let's assume someone can pay cash for a vacation. So it's not a visa vacation. It's not, where they're going into debt for it. Is there a line at which you think, hey, that's too much, or that becomes self-indulgence? Like, I believe in self-care. I also think you can enjoy this life a little bit as well as give back. Do you have a line? Because I think you're right. Vacations are a luxury that more and more people are indulging in. It used to be an annual vacation. Now it's like 2 or 3 times a year, 4 times a year, super high-end resorts, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been to a few very nice resorts myself. So I'm asking this personally as well. Where is there a line, or do you have a line, or would you suggest one?
No, I mean, if there's a dollar amount line, I don't have it. Interestingly, I would draw a different line today than I probably would have 20 years ago when I was a struggling youth pastor making $18,000 a year. Like it's very interesting how today
it does creep,
the
right?
vacation I think is not extravagant, would have been extravagant to me 20 years ago. This is not about, the book isn't, minimalism isn't about self-deprivation for self-deprivation's sake. It's not about sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice sake. It is about living our lives and using our resources for the things that matter most, the things that we'll be most proud of when we get to the end of our lives. And I have come to realize that can I afford it is not always the best filter. It's an important filter. Like, we shouldn't buy things that we can't afford. But when can I afford it is the only filter that we use, I think that we don't make the best decisions in life. So should I buy that new car? Sure, I have the cash. I can afford it, so I'm going to buy that new car. Can I go on this incredibly lavish vacation? Well, I have the money. I can afford it, so I'm going to go. And I think probably the better question to ask is, what if I didn't? I guess that's, what if I didn't? Like, what if I didn't go on that vacation? What could I use the money for instead? If I didn't buy that bigger house, what could I use the money for instead? What could I use the time for instead? And maybe the answer isn't something better. Like, maybe the answer is no, it's my son's senior year in high school. This is the last time we're going to be going on a trip together. I want it to be a meaningful moment that we can look back on and celebrate as a family. And so this is the best thing that I can do with my money and with my time this year. But there may be a different time where you're like, man, I could, if we just went to the other side of the states rather than the other side of the world, I could build a well in the village of Africa and 5,000 people could have clean water. And you know what? Maybe just going to Vermont in the fall would be just as enjoyable as Rome for 2 weeks. And this is the good that I could do with the money instead. So, I mean, I'm not here to, make the decision on what it should be.
It's a values filter.
Way to think about it. Yeah.
It's a values filter. So you cover a number of different things. You've got a section or two on fear. You talk about wealth. You talk about fame as being something that, or being known, that can get in the way of a meaningful life and things that really matter. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up, Joshua?
The thing that the name of the book is Things That Matter: Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life. And I think most people hear the title and they say, okay, good, you're going to talk about technology and how my phone has become a distraction. And there is a whole chapter on technology because I think it's an important one, and the trivial. And I mean, I think we've been dealing with that for centuries, probably when the radio came out, they're like, what a distraction radio has been, and television. And so that's an important section, but like really I think the book gets into deeper issues, like you mentioned, or ones that I would hope stir up more thoughts and spark more interest of, hey, is my pursuit of money, is my pursuit of accolades and fame, and is my pursuit of happiness, or how are some of the past mistakes? 60% of Americans say their past mistakes are keeping them from living out their fullest potential today. And so what are these things that I'm wasting my life pursuing when there are far greater things that I could do? Maybe a little bit about the parable in the Bible about selling the field for the one great pearl. I suppose that's a little bit what the book is about. What's the field that we should sell so that we can find the one thing in life that's most important. So
Why did you write this one? Was it the people you've met? I mean, you have an audience of millions and millions and millions of people who follow your work. Is it hearing too many heartbreak stories? Does it come out of your own pain and journey? Like, what was the motivation for writing it? Because you're right. It's not like I know when I endorsed the book, when I blurbed it, it was like, this is something I wish I had when I was 25, because you figure out some of this stuff, not all of this stuff, later in your 40s and 50s. But what was the impetus to writing this book?
It would be a buildup of a couple different things that all came to one moment. Like it was, hey, my possession to become a distraction. I'm owning fewer things. I'm able to pursue things with greater passion that actually matter in life. Hey, how does this apply to my money and relationships and calendar? And what are some of these other things that are tripping me up? And so it was a topic that I was writing about when I was writing about minimalism that spurred up. I think that's one of the reasons people keep coming back to becoming minimalist.com. It's not just about decluttering the kitchen, but it's really about living a meaningful, intentional life and finding some of these other things around the edges. I used to lead a retreat, a weekend retreat, and I would talk about minimalism, removing distractions. And then Sunday morning for the weekend retreat was always, okay, let's talk about some bigger things that also might keep us from our potential. And then I was in a workshop in Phoenix about 3 years ago on work. And the guy said, close your eyes and answer this question. If you were to die today, what is the one thing you would regret not having finished? And one lady at the table talked about a couple art things that she always dreamt of doing. A mother at the table talked about, I would regret not preparing my kids for life in these very specific ways. And for me, it was this book. It was, I would regret not putting these thoughts down on paper in a helpful way for others, something that these thoughts would outlive me. I would regret that they died in my brain rather than put out in the world. So probably just the years of wrestling with this, the retreat where it kind of came together, and then that one moment of this is the book that I need to write, and I would feel bad if I didn't. And I did an interview podcast with a guy named Mike Vardy, who I've known for a decade. And he said, Joshua, you've written about minimalism, but after reading this book, I could only think that this is the book that you were born to write. Like, this is the message that you've been bringing out into the world more than how do you declutter a kitchen. And so I just, meant a lot, his phrasing, because I kind of feel the same way about it.
It's a great book. So the book is called Things That Matter. And Joshua Becker, where can people find you online? What's the easiest place?
Yeah, becomingminimalist.com is home base for me, and everything flows through there. I'm about it. I'm in a lot of different places, but everything flows through that webpage. So thanks.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. I hope this episode has helped you thrive in life and leadership. And make sure you check out the Art of Leadership Academy. It's my brand new academy where I give you everything you need to lead, run, and grow a church. And now it's time for a generosity tip with Jim Shepard, principal at Generis, where they help you build a thriving culture of generosity.
Hey, church leaders, I want to talk to you about a topic today that's near and dear to my heart. Measure what matters. Finding the metrics that really help you to understand better what's going on in the life of your church. So, the question on the table today is, Jim, if there was one key metric in the Giver database that you would zero in on right now, what would it be? I think for me, it's really clear. It's one thing. It's new givers. In this season, probably now more than ever, your new indicators are the best indicator of the growth that is happening in your church. Make sure you're tracking that. Measure what matters, new givers. Lots of other things to track. I'd make that my number one in this season.